Okay so far. I'm really nervous. I just want to say thank you to Meg for making me blush. I shouldn't have put any on. That was very nice of you. And thank you to all of you for being here and to AIGA for asking me to come. I'm really bewildered that I'm here because I'm not a designer. So when Meg emailed me, I was like, wait, me? Like, sure, yes. I spent the better part of this week trying to figure out what to say to all of you. I wanted it to be perfect and poignant and some prose-worthy, sit in your chair, yes, fuck yes, that's amazing. And I thought of nothing because realizing that when we place that perfectionist veil over ourselves, we can't create. So I listened to the advice of one of the most important people in my life who last night at midnight said, just have fun. I said, okay, fuck it, I'll just have fun. And that's what I'm doing. I have some notes, but mostly I'm just gonna try not to throw up. So I am a photographer. I became a photographer after having children and realizing that I wanted to document their lives in a real, authentic way. And I got pretty okay. I like to tell people I just had a nice camera, but some very generous people saw more than that in me. And one of my former coworkers handed me a check and said, you're shooting my wedding. I used some very colorful language to tell her thank you, but no thank you. And she tucked the check in my purse and said, I trust you, and it's you or no one. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and rented some equipment and read a bunch of blogs on how to be a wedding photographer and showed up and documented her wedding and fell in love with the idea of presenting tangible memories to people, to be able to create a story that lived outside of our minds or words on a page. After that, this was 2011, and I thought that the best and clearest path to success was to just copy, was to just emulate the business models of other people who were successful. I had moved to Minneapolis from Austin, Texas, and found the best wedding photographers here locally and said, what are they doing? What do their images look like? What do their clients look like? And just tried to do that for myself. And I was creating great work. I looked back in 2013 at the body of work that I had produced and realized that I had finally bridged that gap that Ira Glass talks about in his On Being Creative, where my work met my taste. And I was able to be inspired by what I was creating. But something was missing. I could look at the images that I made and I didn't feel anything other than pride. And that's not what I set out to do. At that time, I happened upon Donald Miller's book, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And very serendipitously, as books have a tendency to show up in my life at like the exact right time. And the book starts out with this passage. If you watch a movie about a guy who wants a Volvo and worked for years to get it, you wouldn't cry at the end when he drove off the lot testing the windshield wipers. Nobody cries at the end of a movie about a guy who wants a Volvo, but we spend years actually living those stories and expect our lives to be meaningful. But the truth is, if what we choose to do with our lives won't make a story meaningful, it won't make life meaningful either. And that stung because I knew I was the guy with the Volvo. And I actually really wanted a Volvo XC60, so it was true in that capacity as well. And I asked myself some really hard questions through a lot of tears on my kitchen floor and some bottles of wine and said, what if? What if it wasn't about making an impression, but making a difference? What could I do with the way that I created and the way that I approached my work that wouldn't get me published, but would make an impact? What if it wasn't about the cool kids table, but sitting down where there was room enough for everybody? What if I stopped trying to insert myself into some community that I thought would mean that I had made it, and instead created a community of like-minded individuals who believed we already had? What if it wasn't about the takeaways, but it was about the leave-behinds? What if it wasn't about what I could get out of my photographic work, but what I could give? And what if it wasn't about being a celebrity, but about being a leader? It's hard to tell because you're all looking down on me, but I'm very short. I've never really thought of myself as a leader. I've been called one, which is weird. And I realized in Minneapolis that there's an incredible creative community, and I could try really, really hard to be like, can I be a part of your club? Or I could try really, really hard to be my best self and put my most authentic self out there and let that bring me the right kind of people. I got laid off from my corporate medical device sales career, which goes really well with photography, and realized the universe was telling me it's time to be a full-time creative. This was in August of, what year is it, 2017? 2015. So I spent a year working full-time freelance from my home office and was really lonely. Like, I would go an entire day without using my voice out loud, and was having a conversation with my web designer, who happens to follow Meg, and telling her that I just really wanted to talk to people. And she said, oh, check out Ghostly Ferns. This designer Meg is doing this really great thing where she brought on other creatives that create like-minded work. And I thought, yes, I want to do that. So I did what Austin Kleon says to do, and I stole like an artist. And I realized that I was the most talented person in my room because I was the only one in my house. And I didn't want to be the most, I mean, my dog is great, but I didn't want to be the most talented person in the room. I wanted to be surrounded by people who were better than me. So I reached out to 6 local creatives who were better than me at something, or a lot of things, and asked them to join Northeast Collaborative so that we could share an office space, so that we could share a workspace, so that we could feed and push off of each other, rely on each other for the things that we weren't great at, because you can develop your weaknesses, or you can just live your strengths. And that's how NECO came to be. So I'll invite Meg up now so I can stop rambling and we can chat.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we're just gonna do like a little conversation because I have loads of things that I wanna ask Athena about, and I feel like it's really similar to what I also do with my work in my group. But I feel like, so with Ghostly Ferns, we all have different skill sets. Like, I'm a designer, but the other members of Ghostly Ferns, we have an illustrator, a hand lettering artist, and a product person. And so we each have our own different skill sets, and I can't do what they do, and vice versa. But I feel like with NECO, it's a group of photographers, right?
It is now. It started out, we did have, when we first started out, we had an art director and a graphic designer.
Oh, cool.
But now we're all photographers.
Yeah, and I think that, I think what I love most about NECO is that because it's now photographers, I think it could be easily seen as a group of competitors or people who are like vying for the same jobs. But I love that you think of them as collaborators and friends rather than competitors. Like, what do you think that mindset of thinking of somebody as a potential collaborator rather than a competitor has helped you out with?
I realized in reaching out to the people that I reached out to join NECO, they were all photographers too. Like, who of us in this room doesn't wear the do-it-aller hat, right? Like, we don't just do one thing. And I also do wardrobe styling and set styling and art direction. And I have a social media guru and I have a marketing person. And 2 of my NECO women are also professional models. So we can fill numerous roles, but we also do the same photography work. We do weddings and portraits and editorial, and we're all at the same price point. So they're literally my competition. And I looked at them and said, we could all fight for the same jobs, or we could all push each other toward work that would make us better, and see it as something where if somebody that I care about and am inspired by is getting work that I want, that benefits me too, because it means that there's room at that table for me and for my talent with another client. So it became about, and I say this a lot as a photographer, it's about perspective, and that's literally like what I do. But it really is, like, how could I change it and flip it around and see it from the opposite way, and what would that do for not only my business, but for like my ability to be inspired and to push myself further.
Ah, that's so awesome. And I think that people that are used to working at home, does anyone here work from home? Oh yeah, quite a few people. I worked from home for years before I joined a shared workspace. Like, what do you think? And I think it's one of those things that you don't know you need until you change it and have it, and then you realize that it's amazing. How has it actually helped you working alongside other people rather than working at home?
Well, other people get to hear me sing, so that's good. You know, I have a fridge full of LaCroix and some snacks, So that's nice. And it's, if I'm editing something, or if I have this idea for a shoot or something that I want to create, I have people there that I'm like, hey, wait, what do you think about this? And they do the same thing. And oh, wow, that's such a great idea. And if you've never read Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, I just go buy it. It's like $6 on Amazon. And it's the greatest piece of work that will help push you through any I'm not inspired and I suck and I'm an imposter that we all go through. And a lot of what he says is like, surround yourself with your heroes. It's like, surround yourself with people that you want to be like. And in doing so, like, we all have the same ideas. Some of us are just ready to articulate them. And in hearing the women that I work with share their ideas and their dreams for their businesses, I'm able to dream bigger for mine.
That's so nice.
And hopefully they are too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also just really helps to have people to like go get lunch with, people to go get drinks with after work.
Suck.
Yeah, it's really nice to just kind of have support. And I find that as a creative person, it's so beneficial to have someone around or multiple people around who can actually give you advice on either feedback on your work or if you have a difficult email to write, having people around that you can be like, how do I phrase this email? Or if people around that can help you with pricing is really, really beneficial. And so those are some of the things that I found really helpful whenever I started working around other people.
And it has been. So when we started last August, we were all at similar price points, but not the same, especially for commercial work. And for those of you that aren't from Minneapolis, there's not a huge commercial or editorial market here like there are in some other markets. And a lot of it is agency-based. So being a freelancer and getting that kind of work is very, very challenging. And one of the things that we were able to do by joining forces is not only have a bigger network, because now everybody that they know knows the rest of us as well, which has been great for each of our individual businesses, but to have those conversations and realize like we'd all be better if we priced ourselves the same or closer together, so that if people come to the NECO website and are looking through which one of us they want to hire, it's really about the experience and the work and not about money. And that's one of the paramounts for me in my business, was that I never wanted to compete on price. Because when you compete on price, you always lose. There's always somebody just as good or better than you that's gonna do it for less. And by bringing these women together, none of us compete on price anymore, which has also helped with the whole competition thing. I don't feel like they're my competition, because if somebody hires them over me, it's not because they undercut me. It's because that's what the client needed, and I can celebrate that as just, I'm not the right fit for this job, but somebody in my space is, and that benefits us all.
Oh, that's so great. I think it's so nice that we both have like these wonderful communities of our own that are so supportive and inclusive and celebratory of each other. And I'm just like, what do you think that we can do to inspire other people, or especially make like the entire Twin Cities area more collaborative and supportive?
I think it really does come down to how you view the people who do the kind of work that you do. And we can choose to see them as an inhibition to us moving forward, or we can choose to see them as a tool. And I think that jealousy is to creativity what water is to fire. And we can be jealous or resentful of what other people have, or we can see it and say, what did they do to get there, and how can I use that to get where I want to go? And how can I reach out to somebody and not say, can I pick your brain and buy you coffee, which really means, will you mentor me for free? But I really admire you and your work and would love to talk to you about your creative process. You know, like changing that ask into something that is meaningful toward what they do, and always having room at your table. One of the things that I made sure we did when I started NECO was always have an open desk. And we do. I will always have an open desk for anyone to come during our business hours and sit there and work with us without having to be a part of the collaborative, without having to sign a lease. And we talk about it on our Instagram and everything all of the time. Like, just come. You don't have to be a woman either, though it does say Fempire on the door, just be warned. And I think that's the most important thing, is to just always make sure that if you have enough, you don't build a fence, you build a bigger table.
That's awesome. I've also found that just kind of changing your mindset to whenever you meet someone that does something similar to you, like especially in this type of environment, it's a great example of approaching them as a friend and getting to know them as a friend and think about it as though you're making actual new friends, because you are. And I feel like every time I go to an event like this, I make so many new friends that I then stay in touch with for years. And the cool thing about making more friends is that everyone wants to help out their friends, because they're your friends, you know? So you want to see them succeed, you want to work with them if possible, because everyone wants to work with their friends. And so I think changing the mindset to be less about a transactional relationship of like, oh, what can you do for me at these sorts of things? And just when meeting other people that do things similar to you, changing it to become more of like, let's hang out, let's go, you know, have a drink or have coffee and just like tell me what you're struggling with and what you're going through right now. And then, you know, genuinely caring about each other, I think, and kind of shifting the community mindset would be really nice and really refreshing, I think.
I think who of us in a creative field doesn't feel like our market is completely saturated, right? Like there's too many of us and not enough work to go around. That's true whether the people who are in our market are our friends or our competitors. That it doesn't make less of them if we say, I like your work, I'd like to be your friend. They're still doing the work that they were doing before we brought them into our circle. What changes is us. The market doesn't get less saturated because we make a friend. It doesn't get more competitive because we did. It's just none of that changes, but we can change. And in doing that, like this slide said, like what if it's not about the takeaways but the leave behinds? Like what if it isn't about taking away competition, but about leaving something better for the people that are not only coming up alongside of us, but are going to come up after us?
So do you have any tips for if somebody's like looking to kind of create a similar group to what you have or what I have? Do you have any tips for them to help them get started?
Have a nest egg. It's expensive. Sorry. I think the biggest lesson that I learned in creating NECO was to be really, really, really communicative and transparent about what you're trying to create. I used Ghostly Ferns as like my presentation to these women, and a few of them thought that I was creating an agency. And they ended up leaving because they were under the impression that I was going to be funneling work to the six of us.
I've had the same problem.
And that I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a freelancer. Like I have to feed my family and pay my mortgage first. And the onus wasn't ever on me to bring in work for everybody else and eat last. It was for all of us to eat a meal together, to use a weird metaphor. So that would be a big piece of advice. And the single greatest thing that I think that I did in creating NECO was taking my time to think about who I wanted to invite. Instead of just posting something on social media, I'm getting a studio, available space, and letting anybody join. I was very, very conscious of curating that community to match my values and to be value-based in that way, because I wanted to make sure that we all shared the same goal for why we wanted to work together.
Yeah, I hear from a lot of people that I talk to this with that, you know, they're like, oh, I can't just choose my friends. We wouldn't work well together. Like we have clashing personalities and that would go terribly. So I think it's really important that you choose people who you know are good at what they do. You know that they're good working with clients, or they're easy to work with, easy to get along with, and those sorts of things. Because if you have a sort of personality clash or a work ethic clash, it can be potentially hazardous for even relationships with the clients that you have. So you want to make sure that these people are people that you genuinely care about their health and safety and wellness.
Yep.
You want it to be people who are really good at what they do and are liked by the people who work with them. Those things are really important, because otherwise, you know, you might end up with a sort of like a toxic relationship.
And I had some of that in the early parts, and there were a couple of people who joined who just weren't willing to step outside of community or competition and choose community first. It was no, me first, and we should all be me first in business, because we have incomes to make and jobs to do, but it shouldn't be only me first. There should also be that piece that says, how is this helping others, or my community, or my colleagues to also push better and do better and to grow.
Right on. Agreed. Same. I would love to open it up for questions from everybody. If anybody has any questions, we have mics that we can run around, or you can just shout. Yes, right there. Hi.
Just a question for both of you. So for both of you, you guys do, how do you go about like connecting to other creatives? Obviously events are one thing, but besides that, like what do you do to find these people? They find you, how do you build this community around you?
Oh, I slide into DMs like nobody's business. Not even gonna lie. The women that I reached out to for NECO, one of them is a good friend of mine and also my business partner. We have a boudoir brand together. But the rest of them were people that I sort of kind of knew from Instagram or the local photography community or creative community. Minneapolis is a small town. And I think that maybe all of you can say that about your own markets, that the creative community feels like a really small town, so it's not hard to know somebody who knows somebody who knows everybody. So for me, it was just, I looked at the women who inspired me the most on my social media, because Instagram is where I go for my inspiration of what other people in my community are doing, and just literally slid into their DMs and said, hey, I have this idea. Are you interested? Because I love your work, I love what you're doing, and I think you'd be a great fit, and I'd really love to work with you. And just offered myself up on the pillar of embarrassment. Because what's the worst that can happen? They say no. You know?
Yeah. I'm like sort of on the team of like, I think everyone should be friends with each other. And I feel like I can never have too many friends, and I'm always wanting to like hang out with people. I live for hanging out. I feel like that's how I'm gonna die someday, is by just hanging out for too long. And probably in the sun floating with a drink in my hand, but I love hanging out with people is my favorite thing to do. I just like to be like relaxed and just talking to people about whatever things that come to my mind, not about work usually, but I love meeting people in that capacity, which is why I live for the after parties at these things rather than the talks, because I think that's when you really, well, it's because you're hanging out, but I feel like for me, that's when I really, really get to know people, and that's when the magic happens for me. So whenever I moved here, I didn't know anybody, and I came with the mindset of like, I had just moved from New York, where you're constantly meeting new people and constantly making new friends. And I got here and I was like, I can't wait to meet everyone, for everyone to be my friend. And then I realized that no one wanted to be my friend when I got here. And people would meet with me one-on-one, but I couldn't get them to meet with me outside of that. Like I could never see somebody a second time, because they would just be like, oh, I'm too busy. And they would give me that every time. And it was really hard for me, because I thought that everyone here didn't like me. And I hit sort of a rock bottom period, like not that long ago, maybe a month ago, where I was like, I love this city so much, but it won't love me back. And it was breaking my heart. And I realized that the creative community in Minnesota, for no fault of its own, is like, everyone has their group and they love their group so much, but they don't really see the benefit of expanding their group to a huge network.
We call it Minnesota nice here.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's like, the thing is that everyone's so happy and content with what they have that they don't really see the benefit of expanding it and to meet new people. And so I think that if you're someone new like myself, that is really scary and hard to like get in there and weasel your way through. And especially for me with the attitude of like, no, we should all be friends. So I, a couple weeks ago, started a group online. It's a Slack group. It's super easy, but literally everyone is invited. It's only for people who live here, so if anybody lives here and wants to join my group, you're totally welcome. But we're a group called the Buddy League, and there are some Buddy League members here. Hi. Tiny clapping. Golf clap, thank you, Lisa. So we're called the Buddy League, and we are just a group of friends. So most of the people didn't know each other previously. We're all in some creative capacity of a field, but we just talk about things that friends talk about throughout the day with each other, and then we do events, but our events are things that friends would do together. So it'll be like, hey, I'm at this brewery, does anyone want to join me? Or like, you want to go to a baseball game this weekend? Those types of things. And so I like that. That feels good to me, because it feels like I have actual friends now. Maybe I do. But it also gives me a way to know people who are doing interesting things in the industry in the area. And it's beneficial because people are actually getting jobs from each other in the group, and people are really helping each other out in ways that actual friends would for each other, because we are actually friends. It's pretty cool. Yes?
Okay, I can totally relate with you, because my dog is the only person that I have asked for feedback on.
We have, initially when we set it up, so I have 8 desks, and my space is a giant rectangle, and there were 4 desks on each wall facing the wall. So we just all kind of had our backs to each other, but we were there. So think cubicle without the ugly fabric walls. And we realized that this sucks. We have to like turn around and then we can't keep working. So we put all of the desks together. So there's 4 desks butted up against 4 desks, and our computers are kind of in the way of each other, but that's how we work, and we're not all always there. So business hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. After that, you can have the space privately, and most of the time, Monday through Friday, there's 2 or 3 of us there, and there's 8 of us total. So I don't think there's ever been more than 5 of us in the space at one time, but there's usually always someone else there. So 1 or 2 people isn't distracting. It's nice to not be alone, and we all have headphones. So, whatever it is that we want to listen to or do while we create, we can do. And then one of us is usually the jerk who forgot them, so we have our computer up loud and other people have their headphones in. But I feel like I'm more productive. And what I mean by that is if I'm at home, let's just take editing, for example. I'm sitting at my computer and I'm editing photos. I've never worn a microphone before, I'm sorry. And I'll edit for 20 minutes and then Facebook for an hour. And edit for 20 minutes and be like, oh, Twitter. Hi, how are you? What's happening, Twitter? And, or, edit for 20 minutes. Hi, Pop, what's going on? Whatever it might be. And in the studio, when I work from the studio, it might be the same thing, but the 20 minutes that I spend having a conversation with one of my friends and coworkers is something that I could actually get and use. So it's not just mindless time scrolling through a social media feed. So even though I may work at the same pace, the benefits that I get from my distracted time are so much better. And what is that saying that how we procrastinate is what we should be doing with our lives? Like, I shouldn't be on Facebook with my life. So maybe I should find a better way to procrastinate.
I've also found that I think this is a real thing, that you kind of supplement your loneliness with social media. So I've noticed that if I'm working from home or if I haven't encountered a human in a while, I waste so much time on social media. But whenever I'm at my workspace, surrounded by people and socializing all the time, I realize that I haven't checked social media all day.
Yep.
So it kind of like working at home can be really toxic because you could end up just getting really lonely and not realize it, and then spend all of your day on social media just to get that energy from other people.
Well, that's a whole other talk, of course, but we all know how, social media connects us on the internet and disconnects us from real people. So having a space where, I'm distracted, but I'm connecting versus social media, which is disconnecting. So, go ahead.
Just a question, but when you first started out, I assume you signed the lease,
Mm-hmm.
and then you were paying rent until you had people. How did you split up the rent? I mean, did you just divide it by the number of people who started out?
Mm-hmm. So everybody pays the same amount, whether they use the studio 6 hours a month or 7 hours a day. I didn't want to deal with, I'm an artist, I don't do math. Let's be serious. So I didn't want to deal with figuring out what's your fee if you only need it on Saturdays, or what's your rent if you only want a desk. The lease was, this is what my rent is, this is how many people I can fit here divided by that number. And I've had some transition. Some people only signed a 6-month lease. Some people signed a year. I had to sign a 2.5-year lease. So rent has stayed the same for anybody that comes in, not just the original 6 of us. It's, no, we're all gonna pay an equal amount so that everybody feels like, I don't wanna feel like the boss. I'm not the boss. My name is on the lease with the commercial leasing agency, but I'm not the boss, it's all of ours. It belongs to all of us. NECO, seeing founder is tough for me because it may have been Meg's idea that I stole, but I'm not the founder. I named it and brought these people in, but it's ours, it's not mine.
That begs a follow-up question. What if somebody leaves? Do you then divide the remaining rent? Or do you
Nope,
eat?
I take that.
Okay.
Yep.
I think we have time for one more. Okay. Hi.
If you work on a project together, collaborate, how do you handle the client billing, or is it each designer, photographer, billing separately? Do you work on projects
I'll repeat the question. The question was, if you're working on a client project, how do you handle invoicing the client if they're working on a project together? I assume you mean like how they actually handle the billing and invoicing.
For NECO, if somebody inquires and books through the NECO website instead of one of our individual ones, the reimbursement goes based on the time commitment by each party to the project. We all have our hourly rates that we've set for our collaborative work. And we set that before we started booking collaborative work so that it would always be fair. We would never feel, well, why are you getting more per hour? Like, no, our hourly rate is the same per person when we're doing collaborative work, and it's based on how many hours you're doing for the project. So I don't know about Ghostly Ferns. But
Ghostly Ferns, I can tell you like a quick second of like our legal structure. We are now a partnership, but for the years and years and years before, we just changed this year to a partnership. We were working as though I was the owner of the LLC. It was a sole proprietorship, very easy, and everyone was a 1099 contractor. Public facing, we were all equal, which was really important to us. But legally, it was nice and clean because it was just like everyone was paid out as a contractor. And because we have never and still are not interested in Ghostly Ferns as a company making money, we each get what we earn. So the money gets divvied out to everyone, and everyone gets to get their share. And then there's like no sort of like, I'll keep 20% because I referred the project. We don't do that. But now we're a partnership, so there are 4 of us, but 3 of us are partners, and we'll probably always remain the 3 of us partners. And then as we add more members, they'll just get added as members. Even though public facing, we're all equal. It's important to have like some kind of structure, but the whole like sole proprietorship with 1099 contractors is the easiest way. Sort of if you're not looking to like have employees or do payroll or any of that, because I just want to remain a freelancer. All right, I think we are out of time.
Yeah.
So everyone, thank Athena so much.
Thank you.
You're amazing.